Right now, we want to hear from R. Kelly's defense team about the charges at hand, about these 3 child pornography charges that a jury found him guilty on just moments ago. Let's listen in.
I'm sorry. Come here. Yeah, come here. You guys come. Yeah. So, yes, today we are finally putting closure on a chapter in a lot of people's lives, including Mr. Kelly's. At least I hope. We still have some business in Cook County to deal with. And today, frankly, as you know, there was a mixed verdict, but we won more counts than we lost. And what is reassuring about this, and something that I have been fighting for and was fighting for from the beginning, is that if this jury concluded that he was guilty on the first 3 counts, would they care enough to consider the evidence on the rest? And they demonstrated that they did. And they did their job. They looked at each count separately, and they obviously concluded, as I concluded long ago, as this case was overcharged. The government wanted to, as I said during my closing arguments, be greedy, and they charged counts they couldn't win and that they shouldn't have. And now, and not just, you know, as to Mr. Kelly, but obviously the co-defendants. So I wouldn't imagine they're celebrating right now, and they shouldn't be. They should go back and figure out, you know, whether their approach to this case was the right one. So this, again, obviously, you know, it's not, we're not celebrating a win entirely, but we are happy that the jury really did look at each count. And as I said in my closing arguments, each count counts. They did their job, and we ended up with 7 not guilty counts in a 13 count, right? 7?
Yeah.
7 not guilty counts in a 13 count indictment. So, yes. You know, listen, Mr. Kelly is used to bad news. He has a 30-year sentence, which is egregious and excessive in my view, out of New York in a case that never should have been charged the way it was charged. So, you know, he's still got many fights to fight. But what he did say is that he had a sense of relief that this particular case was not in the future, it was in the past now. And he had a sense of relief, and that probably would have been whatever way it came out, but I think he is relieved to have this behind him. Yeah, yes, of course. You know, we have some issues that we believe are appealable issues, meritorious appealable issues. I don't know that I'm ready to talk about all of them, but there's a couple that come to mind. So. I can't speak to what they will do there, but they got their guilty. They got it. You know, they got the guilty verdicts on the first 3 counts of this indictment, which is the child pornography counts. So I'm not exactly sure what they'd want to go forward on, but we'll find out. We'll find out. We'll take them. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Well, obviously, incredibly. So. The jury did not believe Chuck Freeman. The jury did not believe Lisa Allen. The jury did not, did I say that? Lisa Van Allen, right. Yeah. The jury did not believe Tracy. The jury did not accept that you could charge an indictment and not even bring a witness in, that being Brittany, which was, you know, really offensive in my view. You're going to charge someone with serious offenses that carry serious time, and you don't even think you have to bring that witness in to tell what happened. So those are all, to me, good signs, but credibility was everything. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's how the government rolls. That's how they roll. They don't even believe in their own evidence, so they need to put pressure on other people to try to get them to flip. That's exactly what happened, and I'm glad they got it. You know, but that didn't work out for them. Well, yes, R. Kelly has been prosecuted in the media since 2000, since really Surviving R. Kelly. It's been a nonstop proposition, and Surviving R. Kelly is really the reason there were these federal prosecutions, where the federal governments have have really, and I don't know that people understand how creative and how aggressive the charging has been to get around statutes of limitations here, and that was all driven by Surviving R. Kelly. So I mean, I don't know. I guess the power of the media is very strong. The problem is that Surviving R. Kelly, as you all realize, probably if you've ever seen it, is that the stars of Surviving R. Kelly, one of them, Lisa Van Allen, was found not credible once you brought her into court. Andrea Kelly, who was, not a witness in this case, but she certainly was mentioned in, I would say, unflattering light throughout this trial. She was one of the big stars of Surviving R. Kelly. So, it should go to show you these docuseries, it's not the same as a court of law in the adversarial process.
And you had mentioned that your client was injured.
Yeah,
Detail about that?
Yeah, he had even before he left the MDC in Brooklyn, he had injured his leg, and I don't know exactly how. As you may have noticed, he's kind of been limping in and out of the courtroom here and there. And it hasn't really gotten better, so we're hoping that he doesn't have to make the long trip back to New York for the restitution hearing, which is going to be next.
You mentioned that he said he feels relief that this
Yeah.
case is behind him.
Yeah.
Did he mention to you any remorse regarding the counts?
So,
Conviction?
so listen, I'm not going to talk about my, those types of conversations I have with my client. You can come to sentencing and judge for yourself, because I'm sure he will. Well, I'm not sure, but he may have something to say there. I will say this about my client, and I think it's often overlooked. And I begged the jury to remember that he's a human being, and I think they did. This is a man who had a very, very difficult childhood and had incredible trauma that was never resolved because he became a superstar very young, and there were not people surrounding him that wanted to get him the help to treat the trauma that he had. Okay, and so I think we can't lose sight of that going into a sentencing hearing. It was something I emphasized in New York. So, I think there's going to be a sentencing hearing here, obviously, and there'll be more to say about those things.
Can you, very confused, I'd asked the U.S. Attorney's Office and they can't tell me. These counts, they run consecutively. They're like, there's each 10-year minimum.
You talking about the 1, 2, 3? Well, our position is no. I'm sure the government will have an argument. I have not. I'm not. I don't know if it's discretionary. I haven't done the research entirely into whether or not it's certainly not mandatory. Okay. Yeah, it's certainly not mandatory. At best, it's discretionary, and we would be arguing that they should not be stacked. Of course, we are talking about the same victim, right? Jane. In fact, one of the inducement counts was also Jane. So, you're really talking about this one person who everyone, heard in court. And I think that will play a role in how this all shakes out in sentencing. Well, it hasn't been set yet. I don't think. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is, go ahead.
Ashley Cohen. Yeah.
Okay, so you just heard there from R. Kelly's defense team talking about what the jury in Chicago just handed down moments ago. He has been convicted in yet another case regarding sex crimes involving minors. And so there you were hearing they were getting asked about what the sentencing will be. They said a sentencing date has not yet been decided yet. Of course, this is all happening really simultaneously at the same time of that New York case, I believe earlier this summer, on similar charges to which Kelly was convicted and sentenced to 30 years in jail. But today, this is what happened. A federal jury in Chicago convicting R. Kelly of several child pornography and sex abuse charges, delivering yet another legal blow to a singer who used to be one of the biggest R&B stars in the world. He's 55 years old. He was found guilty on 3 counts of child pornography and 3 counts of child enticement. But the jury, like we've been reporting, acquitted him on a 4th pornography count, as well as a conspiracy to obstruct justice charge that accused him of fixing his state child pornography trial in Chicago back in 2008. He was found not guilty on all 3 counts of conspiring to receive child pornography and for 2 further enticement charges. So you heard there from his team of lawyers that this was kind of a mixed bag on convictions and acquittals depending on the charges involved. Okay, so jurors deliberated for about 11 hours over 2 days. They wrote several questions to the judge, at least one indicating the panelists were grappling with some of the case's legal complexities. It looks like more lawyers have stepped up to the podium in Chicago. Let's listen in.
Jury returned guilty verdicts on 6 counts against Robert Kelly. 3 of those guilty verdicts were for producing child pornography, and 3 of those verdicts were guilty for Robert Kelly enticing minors to engage in sexual activity. Robert Kelly and his 2 co-defendants were acquitted of other counts they were charged with in the indictment. The evidence at the trial in this case revealed reprehensible conduct. That Mr. Kelly engaged in sex acts with multiple girls under the age of 18, and he recorded some of those sex acts on video. We are pleased with the fact that Robert Kelly is finally being held accountable for that reprehensible conduct. We are particularly pleased that Robert Kelly is finally being held responsible for the abuse of his 14-year-old goddaughter. As you may recall, that was the subject of the 2008 trial in Cook County. And the jury in this case found him guilty of that very same conduct. For these counts on which Robert Kelly has been convicted, he's facing very severe prison sentences. On the first 3 counts in the indictment, each of the child pornography production counts, he's facing a sentence of 10 to 20 years imprisonment. On each of the enticement counts, he's facing a sentence of 0 to 10 years imprisonment. So overall, Robert Kelly is facing a prison sentence of 10 to 90 years imprisonment based upon the jury's finding in this case, and for that we're very thankful. Obviously, we're disappointed in the not guilty verdicts on the remaining counts. I would like to thank really truly the outstanding work of many, many people who was able to bring Robert Kelly to justice here today. First, I'd like to thank the prosecutors in this case and my team here at the U.S. Attorney's Office, outstanding people who've worked tirelessly for years in order to put this case together and to bring Robert Kelly to justice, the 4 prosecutors who are behind me and other staff members in my office. Second, the law enforcement officers who for years worked tirelessly to work with the victims in these cases and to bring the evidence that we were able to show to the jury in this case. Most notably, the Department of Homeland Security Investigations, the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, who were the leads in this case in particular on the federal side. And we'd also like to thank the outstanding work of the Chicago Police Department and the Cook County State's Attorney's Office for what they've done over the years on this as well. But really, most importantly, and I think the main reason why I'm down here right now, is I want to thank the victims. I want to thank the survivors, and they are survivors, the people who survived Robert Kelly and his years of abuse at his hands. Their courage to come into this courtroom and to stand before the jury and to reveal the unspeakable things that that man did to them and then videotape them. It's remarkable. Their courage in coming forward, their perseverance, and their resolve to be here years later to tell their story is truly remarkable. And these verdicts, these guilty verdicts in this case, it vindicates them. And not only vindicates them, it vindicates the other individuals who came forward in this case to tell their stories as well. Right. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Do you hope this sends a broader message to
I do. It's hard. I mean, we can see this case in particular, right? I mean, we had a case where there was reprehensible conduct that was presented to the jury, video evidence that was presented to the jury, and what I hope to show is the victims, and again, now the survivors in cases like this, is that it's important to come forward and that you have law enforcement, whether state or whether federal law enforcement, we will be there for them in order to hold accountable those people who did those unspeakable things to them.
John, r.kelly's attorney said afterwards right here that she believes that McDavid has two ground
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, the reason why we charged McDavid and Brown is because we believed that we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they committed crimes in this case. You know, we believe those are righteous charges then. We believe those are righteous charges now. We respect the jury's verdicts in this case, as we do and as we must. But you know, the allegations in the indictment were that they obstructed justice, and we believe that's in fact what happened. Again, the jury found otherwise in this case, but they were righteous defendants in our mind, and that's why we brought the case.
So, one of the victims in the indictment, Brittany, did
Yep.
not testify, and that count Kelly was acquitted on. Can you speak to why she didn't testify, and if she did, would that have changed her?
I don't know if that would have changed jurors' minds or not. But what I will say, because I have heard one of the comments about that, her not testifying. Let's think about what the conduct was here again. Okay, this was that individual, Brittany, engaged in a threesome. Right, Brittany, who was a minor, engaged in a threesome with another person, and the third person in that threesome was r.kelly. And one of those people got on the stand and told about the horrific conduct that occurred in that case. Right. That was absolutely a righteous charge to bring, a just charge to bring, and we would bring that again tomorrow.
Was it just that it was so difficult and she couldn't testify?
I'm not going to get into that as to why she wasn't here. I understand why you're asking, but don't feel it's appropriate for me to talk about that. Thank you. Any? Yes, that's a great question, Jason. So the question is can we ask that the sentence here be consecutive to the one in New York? And the answer is yes. So the judge will have discretion, as I understand it, that the sentence in this case, which will be 10 to 90 years, can either be concurrent or consecutive. But I will tell you, when we have cases like this, when we have instances where defendants are convicted of committing horrific acts against other individuals, and it's separate and apart from other horrific acts that he committed against other individuals, we're asking for that stuff to be consecutive, and I expect that we will do so here. We'll speak more formally in our sentencing papers when they come out, but to be very direct, yes, this can be a consecutive sentence, and I expect that's what we're going to ask for. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so there you were listening to the lead prosecutor in the case from the state, along with behind him his team of attorneys who brought this to trial, who got these convictions, but also have to mention that the jury there disagreeing with the state and acquitting r.kelly and two other co-defendants on some of these charges, especially those charges that were stemming from this 2008 case in Chicago as well. We've been speaking to our reporters in Chicago over the last couple of days, and essentially they have reported and said that the feeling is much to them like a redo of that back in 2008. We'll be speaking to one of our reporters outside of the courtroom momentarily here, but you saw from the prosecution, they were asked about if they will ask for kind of consecutive sentences. Remember, r.kelly has already been sentenced on similar charges after he was convicted in New York earlier this summer. And that sentence that was handed down was 30 years in prison. And so we'll have to figure out what happens next. Remember, we heard from r.kelly's defense team that no sentencing date has yet been set in this. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll be speaking to Fox 32 Chicago's Nate Rogers live inside of the courthouse with more reaction. Welcome back here to Live Now from Fox on this very busy Wednesday afternoon. I'm Andrew Kraft. We want to continue with our live coverage of the jury's verdict that was just handed down in this Chicago case dealing with the disgraced R&B star R. Kelly, convicted on 3 counts. We're being joined right now by Fox 32 Chicago reporter Nate Rogers. Nate is live outside of the courthouse for us. Nate, we've been listening into varying parties and competing interests with their reaction. What do we know at this hour?
Yeah, that's right, Andrew. Good afternoon to you. The verdict came down, in fact, about an hour and a half ago here at the Dirksen Federal Courthouse. Disgraced R&B singer R. Kelly being convicted on 6 of the 13 charges relating to those sex crimes and minors in this case. R. Kelly being acquitted of 7 of those charges. Now, the charges that he was acquitted of include the obstruction of justice charges from his 2002 case. Prosecutors initially alleged that the disgraced singer had paid families money, many of his accusers' families money, to be quiet about the case, to not comment on the sex tape that was shown, in fact, in court this time around. Prosecutors alleged that he even paid and offered some of the families lavish vacations just so they would not comment on the case. That is the obstruction of justice charge that he was cleared of. His 2 alleged co-conspirators in this case also acquitted on the charges that they face. In this case, we heard from Kelly's defense attorney earlier today, who said that her client felt relieved at this point in the game. But you got to keep in mind, this comes just more than a month or 2 after he was convicted of sex crimes in New York City, sentenced to 30 years in prison for similar crimes in this case. What was so unique about this latest case here in Chicago is that many of his victims actually spoke out and testified in court, alleging that Mr. Kelly had sex with them when they were minors and recorded those acts. Again, the latest here, Kelly being convicted of 6 of the 13 charges, acquitted on 7 of them. We understand that sentencing may take place in November. Kelly did not speak in court today. He also, of course, if you've been following the trial, did not testify. But that is, in fact, the latest here at the Dirksen Federal Courthouse. Nate Rogers, Fox 32 Chicago. Andrew?
Okay, Nate, thanks so much there. Yeah, we just listened in live to the defense team. They didn't know really when a sentencing date might be set. The prosecution was asked about consecutive sentences. You alluded to that 30-year sentence R. Kelly got in New York, but we spoke with Casey Cronus yesterday from Fox 32 as well, and maybe you feel this way too, maybe people in the room feel this way, that this was kind of a redo of the 2008 trial that R. Kelly was acquitted on. Do people feel that?
Yes, to a certain degree. I mean, the broader discussion that we haven't heard a lot more, folks that have really followed this truly horrific case in Chicago. Even though Kelly was found guilty on several charges and acquitted on others, there's so many other folks that played a role in these crimes allegedly, whether they were folks that served on Kelly's team, people that worked with him, and according to prosecutors, helped hide some of these tapes or even distribute them. You got to remember, if you follow the case, when these sex tapes came out years ago, they were often sold and found on street corners throughout the country, and that is some of the damning things that have come out of this case. But many of the folks that have played a role have not been found guilty yet. And so one of the questions is this real justice? Of course, Mr. Kelly has a very long time in prison ahead of him. Just one of the counts that he was found guilty on today covers a maximum sentence of up to 10 years. And again, he was convicted on 6 of those charges. And so, again, his days ahead very long in prison.
Okay, Nate Rogers, thank you so much for your reporting. We'll talk to you again on this breaking development.
Thank you.